Paddle and Fin podcast. I'm your host, Sean,
And I'm Susie Q.
and we're coming back from an awesome trip down to Dale Hollow. For the folks who joined us down there for the Paddle and Fin Open, it was always, a great time. It was, my favorite part is getting to see the other hosts that we never get to see in person. We see each other across the computer screen all the time, but to get to hang out with everyone is definitely the highlight of my weekend. So super psyched about that. But I think it was a good time all around.
It was. It really was. The weather was definitely spring. It's like no matter what year we go down, we always get this surprise, like cold snap in a sense. I mean, it was what 30 degrees Sunday morning, I believe. So yeah.
Crazy. I'm still hoping that one of these years I go, it's going to be warm. I got down there on Thursday, and it actually was pretty warm Thursday.
Yeah,
I
it
was
was.
fishing in shorts and a t-shirt. So
It was nice. It was definitely nice. And then we came back home Sunday night slash Monday morning. I think we got in about 1:15 a.m. And it was kind of cold, but I was really salty because the next morning I saw all over Facebook that like the northern half of the US got to see the northern lights, and which we had missed by 2 hours. And I was like, no.
that would have been an awesome drive home had you
Yes,
just
I know,
drove
and
home
I'm
with the normal.
surprised like we didn't see anything either, but I think it was just the timing of where we were and whatnot. So yeah, I was just like, oh dang it.
Well, that was definitely a fun time, and thanks for everybody who joined in. For those guys who fished the event, we had some amazing bags. The guy who won first just crushed it. Like he took big bass both days and got first in the tournament. So he went home with his pockets definitely pretty heavy.
Yeah. And I mean, like, we gotta admit, too, like, out of all the tournaments that have been around, I'm pretty sure we blew every tournament out of the water when it comes to big bass payout. I mean, it was $2,020 both days. I mean, what tournament trail can
Right.
top that?
Even native, the big bass hour is only 1,000
Right.
for big bass. So
Right.
still
So yeah,
pretty
that was
crazy.
that was awesome. And Robert Knoll, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he went home with pretty much like 6 grand.
Dang.
Whew!
So I'm still looking forward to. I started listening to the Reel Down show about that, where they interviewed him because I'd like to just hear what the heck I did wrong.
Right.
But anyway, we still caught fish. Both Susie and I were lucky enough to catch some fish down there. I was right around the corner from Susie when she caught a big one. I heard her yelling. So that was cool to see in person. But
That's right.
definitely some good times. But anyway, the reason why we're here tonight is we have a special guest with us who has been on Paddle and Fin before, but we're going to talk to him about spring crankbaiting tonight. Just one of my favorite techniques, one of my first kind of confidence techniques. So I'm looking forward to diving deep into that. But let's welcome Craig Dye back to the show. Welcome back, sir.
What's up, Sean?
Not
Susie
much, man.
Q, what's going on?
Not much.
So, it's been a while. It's been at least 3 years since you've been on the Noob Show, and I'm not 100% sure when you were last on Paddle and Fin in general, but figured to give you a
Right.
chance to let folks know, for those who maybe haven't seen you or don't know who you are, basically who you are, where you're from, kind of what brought you to this point in fishing and kayak angling. And, I know, you've had your hand in the industry for quite a while. So just let folks know, kind of how you got here.
Well, really, I'll make it quick. But I grew up in Louisiana. I went to LSU and did all that deal, and I ended up here in Georgia. Work brought me here, but I fish, redfish and saltwater, and I fished a lot for bass and ponds growing up. And then when I moved to Georgia, this is where I actually really discovered kayak fishing. That's actually my girlfriend and I were looking for something to do together. And we noticed there's awesome rivers all around, Atlanta and North Georgia. And we got a tandem kayak, and we did that a little while. I think a lot of y'all know how this goes. Like, it's fun for a little while, but you eventually want to get your own kayak and kind of go your separate ways. And that's what we did. And I'm super competitive, man. And I started learning about kayak tournaments. And this is when Drew Gregory started the river bassing way back in the day, doing it out of Bass Pro Shops. I'm sure y'all remember that. That was a long time ago. It was probably maybe, I don't know, 8-10 years ago or something like that. And I fished the first season he did it. I was there. I was part of that, which was really cool. And just fast forward a few more months, I started, getting a better quality kayak. I started in I think it was a Future Beach from Dick's Sporting Goods. And then I went into a Wilderness Systems tarpon, and then moved my way up into the ride. Anyway, then I moved to Nashville, and that's where actually I became good friends with Chad Hoover, and that's when the KBF all the trails started. So I happened to be in Atlanta when the river bassing came through, when Drew started it, in Nashville when Chad started the KBF trails and all the KBF stuff, and that's when I met Chad. Was in Nashville, became good friends with him, and man, I've been fishing the KBF stuff, and I fished some of the Hobie events and the bass events, and now I'm back in Georgia, and a few sponsors later, I just Chad helped me get that started off back in the day, and I really thank him for that. But now I'm here in Georgia, and I fish if a tournament's close and it works in my schedule, I don't care what tournament trail it is. If it's a lake I want to go to, I'm just going to go. So I don't fish as many national events as I used to, but while in Tennessee, I got a couple state championships there, and I've had a decent amount of wins. But lately with two young boys and soccer and stuff like this going on, I don't get to compete as much as I like to, but I fish a lot. I fish it once a week, and I still like to do a lot of video stuff. You probably know that, but that's kind of it, man. I'm here and still doing it. I mean, I've been doing it maybe 10 years now. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That definitely makes you kind of one of the OG, man.
I know. I don't know. It's weird, man, because I'm 40, but I'm not the young guys, but I'm not like the old guys. I'm I don't know. I'm in the middle, so I don't know.
That's a good mix. It's a good mix. So. Well, Atlanta, are you? Do you happen to be a Braves fan?
I am. Growing up, we were Astros fans because that's what my dad always watched on TV. We're close to Houston, but I've become a Braves fan. I go to a few games a year. I only live 25 minutes from the stadium.
Awesome,
so,
awesome. I'm a stranger in a strange land, being a Braves fan in Pennsylvania. So
Yeah. Look, if you want to go to the game, come stay here, man. We'll shoot down there and go.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, for real.
But cool, awesome. Well, I know, like you said, you've been, busy in the industry, obviously, and but your videos definitely are very informative and stuff, and I think that's what originally drew us to have you on the show initially, and again, I was talking to Brian a little bit. I was like, man, I'd really like to talk to someone about crankbaiting. I was like, who do you think I should talk to? He's like, you got to talk to Craig Dye. So I was like, okay. So, and had I done a little research beforehand, I probably would have realized that we actually did do a little bit of a crankbaiting episode way back in 2020. But I'm excited to talk to you again because my knowledge and skills have kind of definitely grown since then. So I'm sure there are things that we didn't talk about back then that we can talk about tonight, but specifically Absolutely. We were going to kind of talk about why crankbaiting in the spring is really something to look at, and I figured we could jump into that.
Absolutely, yeah. I kind of go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, so why what makes the crankbait something you want to pick up in the springtime? What's ideal about that?
The number one reason is the fish are always on the move. They're either coming in from deep water, to secondary points. They're looking to spawn. I mean, obviously when they're spawning, they're hanging out, but they're not going to be there very long. So they're constantly on the move. And the cool thing about crankbait fishing, which I love, like, I'm a power fisherman. I love moving. I like fishing current. I like putting my trolling motor on if I'm using the motor guide. I just like to cover water and just catch those active fish. But the main thing about the spring is these fish are moving all the time. Like, you just feel like they could be in, 15 foot one day, and you get a few warm days and they want to get up and spawn. All of a sudden they're in 3 or 4 feet, and all of a sudden they're in 2 feet, and it's just a great way to locate fish, number one, because you can cover so much water with a crankbait. That's probably the number one reason, is the fish are on the move and you can cover a lot of water and find fish quickly.
And I think that's kind of, what made me fall in love with it first, because the first few baits that I really had confidence in were very, very slow presentations, like Wacky Rig, it's something that, that just is not easy to cover water with. And, living on the Susquehanna and the size of it, finding fish there can be hard because there is so much places to look. And so when I did kind of pick up a crankbait and started learning that craft, it definitely helped me to find more fish on the river, because you can cover so much water. And so I can definitely see what you're saying there.
Yeah, and also a lot of times the fish either got to eat it or they got to get out of the way. That's like in my mind, like, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Like, especially in in a river situation where those, when you have current, you have eddies and these seams, like, where these fish are going to be most likely. Like, you just know, you know what I mean? And you can put that crankbait right on them and throw it, up current and bring it with the current. And and when they eat it, Sean, I mean, that feeling when they hit it, man, knock the slack out of your line, it's the best.
Oh yeah,
it's hard.
Yep.
It's hard to beat. It's hard to beat.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that I definitely had in my notes to talk about, was fishing a crankbait in current, because I've had way more luck on it in current and on the river than I have like on my local lakes. There's places on my local lakes where it works for me, like a riprap bank or something like that. But I've definitely had more success sitting in current, or casting it in current in seams, and like you're saying, eddies like that. So
yeah, I mean, personally, I prefer to fish like that. Actually, one of the state championships that I won in Tennessee, it wasn't on a river, but it was wind blowing. They had a bridge with riprap, and the wind was blowing hard. It was blowing like 10 or 15, 20 miles an hour, and created crazy amount of current around these rocks, right? And I was throwing a big 5XD upwind, pulling it down, let it hit off those rocks, and I had caught like 2 smallmouth, maybe 3 or 4 pounds, and won the state championship doing that. That's something about, I was going to talk about later as we get into this, but finding that like windy bank or that current or that seam, and I mean, that's something that I think, we're talking about noobs here, right? Like, that's something most guys are going to miss. Like, they're just not. That windy bank, that's where you need to be. It's hard to fish. It's a pain to fish. But, this time of year, the water's getting warmer, especially if the water's clear, that windy bank is where you got to be to get bites, especially on a crankbait.
No, and that's definitely good to note. And that was definitely going to be one of the things I wanted to talk about, because, some folks will just go out and chuck and wind that thing all day long and not be where the fish are. And that can make for a long and tiring day on your arm when you're just out there chucking and winding, but if you can kind of narrow your area where you're casting down, and make smart choices like that, like you're saying, windblown banks and riprap banks and that kind of thing, and put the pieces together, it's going to make you a lot more successful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's you'll get addicted to it quick, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. Susie, do you have much of a crankbait bite where you are?
I was actually gonna pick Craig's mind a little bit, just to kind of put this in a little bit more of an aspect for noobs. So, when you're fishing a crankbait and you're kind of wanting to fish areas that may not have like riprap or something like that, or it may just be like a very weedy lake or type of thing, it may be easy for people to think, oh, well, I have to have structure to fish a crankbait, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, That's true. There's actually, it's funny you say that because when I was fishing the Bassmaster Championship on Chickamauga, and that was a very tough event. I don't know if y'all followed it very closely, but they lowered the water big time, right? So to your point, everything that's good on that lake was out of the water, 3-4 feet. Every good stump, every log, every brush pile, every tree that's fallen off the bank, it's all dry. And all you have is these dirt banks, and you're like, this lake is supposed to be awesome, top 10 in the country. Why can't I catch a fish? I mean, go back and look at the results of that tournament. It was brutal. Like day 2, no current, like it was rough. But what I discovered late on day 2, it actually moved me up 30 spots. Late on day 2 of that tournament, there's a lot of wind in the afternoon, right? And there's this bank that has a little bit of depth to it. And I knew the wind was blowing on it because I was on the other side. I could see the wind coming around. So I go up there. There's nothing on that bank. It's just a clay bank. But what's happening is the water, they stopped the current on Chickamauga. The water got super clear, like 3, 4, 5 foot visibility. And it almost looked like Lake Lanier out there. Like it was clear.
Wow.
But that wind on that bank is creating a mud line from the clay, right? And there's nothing on that bank. Nothing. But that mud line, bait fish go up in there, the bass go up in there, they want to be shallow. They went in there and I started throwing a square bill and a chatterbait, and I caught 2 big fish in the last 30 minutes of the tournament. And if I would have caught 2 more, I probably would have been in the top 20. But I think I ended up like 35th, 38th out of like 160. So
that's still good.
It was
given
good,
the conditions. Yeah,
it was brutal out there. I'm telling you, it was brutal. But what I'm saying is, there was nothing on that bank. But
right, it was featureless.
That mud line, that wind blowing. Some bait, some shad maybe got into that mud line. Feel protected, and the bass were right there to ambush them. So, you don't always have to be banging it off a log or rock or the edge of grass. It just kind of depends on the conditions. If there's a lot of bait, you see a lot of bait flickering everywhere, that type of deal. That's something to look for. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I know, so let's start out with tackle, because that made a huge deal for me. I remember, the first couple times I threw it, I really didn't like the crankbait, and it was because I was throwing it on totally the wrong equipment. I ended up, this is back early days, so I was totally a budget fisherman, and I remember buying a crankbait rod, a Cast King crankbait rod off of a dude on Craigslist. And, as soon as I bought that rod, it made a huge difference on my hookup percentage, on how I could work it, the depth I could get my crankbait to. So I was going to have you talk a little bit about, and now I know it can be different depending on the type of crankbait you're throwing, because obviously a 6XD is going to be different than a square bill. But in general, what are you talking for rod and, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I brought, just for the fun of it, why not, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
I mean, if we're going to talk about it, why not bring it in here? Hopefully I won't knock something over.
You don't have a ceiling fan in that room, do you?
Yeah, but it's off. This is I probably throw this rod. This rod is my favorite rod. This is, if you want to spend a little more money, this is a St. Croix Legend glass rod, right?
Nice.
So this is I think it's 6'10". Yeah, this is a 6'10". And I like this rod. It's shorter. It's a medium action rod with a moderate tip. And look, and I know, like, you can go on YouTube and search 100, best equipment for crankbait. And most of the time, there's, really the main thing you got to know is you want a rod that has some give to it, and because that's super important. Because, well, there's a few reasons. Like, number one reason is, like, when you cast a rod, you want to have a nice soft tip, right? So when you're reeling it in, you're reeling it through a brush pile or over rock or whatever it is down there. That rod's going to have some give to allow that bait to bounce off, to like basically kind of ricochet off instead of digging in and getting hooked, and then rolling and then you're hung up. So it's just going to allow that bait to hit and then bounce off and turn sideways and just keep going. So that's not, probably the number one thing is you can fish it just like you do a spinner bait or a chatterbait or a swim jig. I mean, look, you're going to get hung up sometimes. That's just life, with all these treble hooks. It's going to happen every now and then.
It's a treble hook bait, so that does happen.
Yeah, but to answer your question, I mean, for a square bill for fishing, 6 or 8 feet or shallower, I like the 610 right here. Let me look. I brought this one. I think is a 7.3. Now this is actually a St. Croix of Victory. This is a they call this a heavy moderate. So it's got kind of a stiff backbone, but a super soft tip. So I throw chatterbaits and I also throw square bill, like heavier square bills, like the KVD 2.5s.
Mhm.
I don't have any out right now, but the bigger square bills. And then that's just another 6'6". So the other one I have here, actually, this is a great this is like $100 rod. This is actually one of my favorite rods. This is the Bass X rod, and this is a 6'6" rod. I love this rod when I'm fishing the river and like the Etowah River, when I don't have a lot of room to cast, like a lot of you have to go under a lot of overhangs. And I use that. It's a 6'6". It's also a medium, action with a moderate tip. That's the number one thing. Just remember that if you're throwing a crankbait, medium action, moderate tip. Now you can look if they're biting and those fish are super aggressive, you can throw a medium heavy rod to catch them on a crankbait. But I'm just telling you, in a tournament, y'all know how this goes. In a tournament, they're going to bite this hook, right? And it's going to be hooked like barely skin hook, right? In practice, it's going to look like that. Right? Right? You're going to see like that in his mouth, but in tournaments that doesn't happen. So just to better
avoid the heartbreak. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
What ratio reel do you use with your crankbaits? Is it the same or do you vary it up?
That's a good question. I'm a big fan of like the 6-8 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who don't know, that's kind of like in the middle of the road. Like a lot of guys who go for like deep cranking, big heavy crankbaits like that 5-1-1, which basically, if you don't know what that means, it basically means you're going to reel really fast and your bait's going to go slow, but it creates a lot of power, right? So that's like riding a mountain bike when you're in a low gear and you're pedaling super fast to get up that hill. That's basically what it does, So that's kind of a good way to think about it. But I like something kind of right in the middle. And the reason is because those kayaks are always moving. And like you hook a big fish, it's going to pull you toward him. A bass boat's just going to sit there. So I don't like a super slow reel, even though, they say to use these super slow, like 5 3-to-1s. I like that medium, like kind of right in the middle, 6-8. That's what I use. I use all the Lew's custom. They're called custom speed spools. I forget what they're called.
Yep.
And I use 6-8 to 1s, and I use the mess out of them. And I mean, I go through them, but when you're cranking, you put a lot of wear and tear on those. Especially how much I just love crankbait fishing so much. I mean, I probably do it too much to a fault, but I've caught so many fish doing it. And I just love that feel of running your bait off like a log or a brush pile or, even in current, and you just feel them eat it. I mean, your rod just like loads up.
Yeah,
guys, it's the best, man. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. If not, you need to get out there and do it. It's fun.
No, and I can definitely echo that because, looking online, I did read a lot where you want a slower reel. So I went out and bought it was something in the 5s, like a 5.51 or something.
Yeah.
And I really didn't like it. Like I felt like I was
It's
constantly
hard.
trying to keep up with it. And, it just was a struggle. So I bumped up slightly higher and it definitely made a world of difference to me. So I can definitely recommend that too. There is a time and place for it, but for just your standard kind of crankbait fishing, I would say, definitely bump up the speed a little bit. Now we're not talking like high speed reels, even max 7, probably be top end, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you can overwork the bait. And I mean, it just, I don't know. I just, that's 6-8, 6-5 to 1. It just seems like for me, it's just a perfect speed,
Yep.
So, and also I use the same thing on spinner baits and chatter baits. So most of my moving baits are all the same gear ratio, just so I just know, like, that cadence, you just kind of get used to that one cadence,
Absolutely.
I think I have a higher speed for like my whopper ploppers and my, like my faster moving stuff, buzz baits and walleye, like my spooks and stuff like that. Like this rod, this 6'6" is actually, I have braid on it now. but I have my whopper plopper on here. But this is what I use for all my top water, like poppers, spooks, and whopper ploppers.
Gotcha.
And having that, once again, having that soft rod helps keep those fish hooked. Even when you're throwing braid, it'll help keep the fish hooked. So,
So that brings up a good thing. So we've talked rod and reel. Let's talk line for a little bit. So are you? Yeah. I know some crankbait guys are diehard fluoro all the way. No line to leader or anything like that. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm kind of old school, man. This is here right here. Good old monofilament.
Really nice.
Awesome.
Look. Until it stops working, I'm going to quit using it. But for fishing, like shallow cranking, like 10, 12 foot and shallower, monofilament works fine. I love the stretch. I just love any opportunity to not lose a fish, and having the rod, that has that, nice soft tip combined with the stretch from the mono. You got to think, we fished mono forever. I didn't fish fluorocarbon until I was, 25 years old. I caught plenty of fish back in the day on monofilament, and it's cheap. And because I do fish crankbaits a lot, I like to have try to keep your spool full. Also, you don't, when you get that spool too low, it's going to feel like you're throwing that 5 1-to-1. It's going to be hard to keep it working. But so I changed my line a lot. And mono is cheap, and this is 1,000 yards, and I've had this for a couple of years, So, if it just feels a little low and a little weird, I'm going to go rip all my line off and just fill it up real quick. I use 12-pound. If you're fishing super clear, like if you're on Lanier or somewhere up north where you have 5, 6 foot visibility, you can go to 8 or even 10. I just went to 12. I like 12, especially on a river, because the river things can get a little squirrely. You hook one, he's around a log,
Oh, yeah.
But also like square bills, a lot of guys like to use like 17-pound, 15-pound. Like if you're fishing shallow and you're in a big fish lake and it's muddy and you're fishing shallow, throwing big square bills, maybe 15-pound or 17-pound work just fine,
Cool.
Do you feel that when you use mono, since it floats, it also helps with like maybe some of the action a little bit? Because I know sometimes when you're retrieving a crankbait and you're letting it bounce off of stuff, sometimes you'll let it pause, and then sometimes that's when you get the bites as well. Didn't know if you noticed any difference with that, or if you tried mono versus fluoro.
I've honestly stuck with mono. It's just something I really like. And look, 99% of the pros use fluorocarbon on crankbaits, but until somebody proves me that it doesn't work, I'll probably stop using it. But for me, it works really well. When it comes to, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that people who are new to crankbait fishing are going to have to deal with and kind of learn. Like when you're reeling a crankbait and you kind of feel it start to get snagged, the first thing you do is just stop.
Let it go.
Stop. And a lot of times, I don't have. Actually, I do. A lot of times it'll float out. If you just give it a second, it'll back up and it'll float back out. But something I've been throwing more recently, in the past, really probably 4 or 5 years. This is the Rocco. This is Rapala, the Rocco. You've probably seen that before. These are balsa, and balsa, it floats, like they float up a lot quicker. It's a lot more buoyant than plastic, so it will help. I imagine, Odd Defo. I think Odd Defo lost too many DT6s in his life, and that's why he created that Rocco that has that more square bill to help it bounce off a little bit. But he really wanted that buoyancy, I think, because it does help the bait back up, and it happens a lot of current too. You'll like get wedged in a rock, you'll feel it, you're like, oh, now I got to paddle up there and get it out. It's a pain in the current. But sometimes if you just wait a second, it'll float out.
Float back up. Yep.
Yeah.
Balsa was definitely going to be on my list of questions, just because that definitely seems to be, in my experience, especially, we're talking springtime here, but I've had luck in pretty cold water cranking balsa, and so that was definitely kind of an eye opener for me. Way later or earlier into the season than I would normally pick up a crankbait. I've had luck because a lot of times the balsa action can be just a little bit different too than than a normal plastic crankbait. So
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the DT6. When I moved to Nashville, Tennessee in 2014 and started fishing around like Percy Priest Lake is full of rock. A lot of the rivers are full of rock. I was about Kentucky Lake, Old Hickory, and I just caught fish on those DT6s, and I just loved it. It has that nice tight wobble, and they're a little more expensive. But the thing about Rapala, I think it's worth the money because you never have to tune those crankbaits. Like when you buy them, they are dead straight. And like I've never bought one where I put it in the water and it's running off to the side. Because let me tell you, I hate tuning crankbaits. I don't like it. I'd rather just grab a new one. I'd rather just put it on the shelf. I mean, I'll do it if I have to in a tournament if something is just right. But I'm not a big fan of it. But yeah, that balsa, I've caught so many fish on that DT6 and DT10 crankbait that it's my number one confidence all-time bait right now. Like, and I kind of learned it from fishing, year round in Nashville. It gets pretty cold there, but I mean, I've caught them in the water. It's like 45, 46 degrees is the coldest I've caught them.
mm-hmm.
I mean, you could throw it from 45 degrees up to, middle of the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're eating shad, they're going to eat a crankbait.
So, well, speaking of that, then one of the questions that I've had asked a lot is, how do you know when to, when do you do a square bill, or when do you obviously depth, your DT6s and DT10s, the main thing that you're getting there is depth, but is that the only difference, or what kind of dictates what you're going to throw?
Most of the time for me, it's water clarity.
Okay.
And the time of year. And also kind of what bait's around, kind of what I'm fishing around. But, like for example, down in Florida, fishing the KBF trail down there, I'll start catching them on this Strike King Hybrid Hunter.
Yep.
You see, and the water was pretty clear where I was at, so you can see it's kind of clear. But this right here is the way this lip is built. I don't know the science of it, but it works really great when it comes through grass. It just has a way to come through and doesn't get hung up a lot. It kind of protects the hooks as they come through. So that's kind of it's kind of where I start there, and the water's really clear there. So
is that kind of like a wake bait one that you were just holding up? Is it pretty shallow, or is it just different just because of that bill?
Well, they make different ones. This one maybe goes down about 3 feet. So
okay.
I work this just like a square bill crankbait, but I'm throwing this around grass.
Okay.
So this is new to striking. This only came out, I think, in the last few months, or maybe the last year or so.
I was going to say, I think it was a year or so ago, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe a year or two. I'm not 100% sure, but it's actually really cool, and it actually works pretty good around laydowns too. It's just something different. And this is the small one. They have a much bigger one. I don't know the sizes exactly, but they have.
I should go up and get my crankbait box. I can't believe I forgot that.
But when it comes to clarity, if the water's clear, in the river, in the lake, doesn't matter. I like to throw these more kind of translucent colors.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Berkeley Pit Bull. I think it's called Morning Dawn or something like that.
Nice.
If it's like most lakes I come to, I'm throwing just this regular DT6, just the shad color. I think this is called Shiner. I'm not 100% sure. Or I'm like, if the water's not super clear, super muddy, anything shad color, you're probably going to catch them. I mean, if you're in the right area, you're throwing around the right stuff, you're probably going to catch them. So I throw a lot of natural colors like these here. And, I like this right here, I fish the steam plant. Look at this thing. I fished the steam plant a lot in Tennessee when I was there. And you could fish all winter, right? Because the water was warm. You'll be 15 degrees outside, and that's the best time to go because every shad in the whole river wants to be in that warm water. And this is from throwing on those flats at the steam plant and just wore the thing off.
That's awesome.
So, but these kind of, I don't think people should. I mean, look, these guys who paint crankbaits, they're good, but the details they put into them. I mean, look, that thing is going by like this, right. You know what I mean? I'm big on just shades and colors, and I forget what they call this color. This is one of my favorites.
Oh, that's an oyster.
Yeah, oyster.
I've got that one right there. I know that one.
it just looks like it's been sitting out in the sun for a week. You know, it just has that cool, like, something about that color. But probably my go-to, I want more money on the Helsinki Shad DT6 than anything. It's just that color. I don't know. It just works. But I will say this while I got everything right here. Talking about, how to work a crankbait. We'll get into that more, but you see the difference here on these,
oh yeah.
Yep.
You see that? That's what you want your bait to look like. It doesn't look like that, you're not working it right. So you can tell that this bait has just absolutely been hammered on rocks and hitting everything that it can. So that's a way to get bit on a crankbait real quick,
Cool. And so like, are you, like, when you're looking to throw a DT6, are you pretty much looking at 6 foot of water, or what depth are you like when you're like, oh yeah, that's DT6 territory there?
The thing is, on 12-pound line, and having a good rod. I mean, I'll say this real quick about reels. Spend a little bit more money on a reel. If you're going to get out there and do it, believe me, you want to be able to make long casts. You want to be able to. It's just like spend at least $100 on a reel. It's going to make your life so much easier. I'm telling you. So the new guys listening to this, number one tip: spend a little more money on a reel if you want to get into crankbait fishing. It'll pay off. But for a DT6, what I was going to say is, you asked about depth. Is that on a long cast, I can get it down to 8, 9, sometimes 10 feet.
Okay.
So if you're casting it really far, as long as you're not, moving forward, you can get it down there. So I mean, really 4 feet to 10 feet. I'll throw a DT6, but in current, if I'm casting up current, like I'm fishing like Susquehanna or the Etowah or the Tennessee River, when I'm fishing like the tail races underneath the dams on Tennessee River, if I'm sitting in, say, 6 or 8 feet fishing current, I'm throwing a DT10, because you got to have a little bit more depth to get it down there, because it's moving with that current and you're trying to fight it. And if you try to keep a DT6 down there, it's going to be really tough. So I always up my crankbait, to the next depth, 1 or 2 feet. So you are ticking those rocks the whole time you're down there, trying to, that's the key is in current, especially like Tennessee River, big water, a lot of current is, those fish are down there behind those rocks, just waiting to ambush. But the problem is fishing crankbaits up there, there's a lot of rock down there. And if you're like digging deep, you're going to get hung up every time. And you're like, that's $10, that's $8, that's, and then you're just mad and you just want to go home. Right. So, but the key, as you know, Sean, is you barely want to tick those rocks, but you got to get down there. If you don't get down there, I mean, you'll catch a lot of drum, but I think the key to getting down there is just, that's the thing about the depth is current, just go one crankbait deeper than you would probably go.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's definitely, like you said, pulling it through current makes a big difference. And even, whether you're going upstream or downstream makes a huge difference, versus what you're feeling. But I definitely agree with that. And that's one thing that, initially on the Susky, they always joke it's a mile wide, but a foot deep. And so there's definitely places where you throw the square bill a lot, because it is, 2-3 foot deep. But there's also places and channels where, I can think of quite a few places right by me where it is in that 6 to 8 foot range. And with the DT6, it is tough to get it down there for any length of time,
Like you get it down there about, 10 feet of your cast, and you're not in that target area. But first, the goal is to get it down there quick and keep it down there and just have them react on it, So, and fishing in current can be tricky, especially if you've never done it before. You don't know if you're doing it right. You don't know, like it's kind of weird, and it just takes time and a lot of practice.
Yep. And carry a plug knocker with you. That's another one of my money saving tips, because holy cow, that is for the price of like a 3-pack of plug knockers, it has probably saved me hundreds of dollars, I think, easy.
I don't even want to know.
You don't know a plug knock? It's a little weight that you when you get snagged up, you just clip it on your line and you drop it,
Oh, okay.
pop it twice, and 9 times out of 10, everything comes back up,
Okay, I think I've probably heard them of something different, but I was like, a plug knocker? Like,
Yeah, they're called lots of different things. I think lure retriever, or but I always call them plug knockers. But
The problem I have with them is that it takes time. When I'm in a tournament,
tournament, right?
right.
I just break that thing off. I don't want to know. I don't want my wife to know how much.
Hey, what happens on the noob show stays on the noob show. Except for anybody who listens, but yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about this show and kind of what we were going to do, what we were talking about. And I just want to say, like, if you're new to crankbait fishing, you want to get into this. The main thing is, obviously the right rod, you can use mono or fluorocarbon, whatever you want to do. I don't suggest spray, but the main thing is, I would say get a square bill, go fish in 2 to 5 foot of water, and just run water and learn how to work around wood and logs, and and just stick with it. Stick with it. It'll surprise you. You can catch a lot of big fish, but just make sure you have a medium rod with a moderate action, and just that's really going to help you not have a very frustrating day.
Absolutely. How about silent versus rattles? Do you have a time when you go for one versus the other? Obviously, you'd think maybe dark water or muddy or colored water, you might want some sound, or if you're in a high pressured area, you might not want as much sound.
Yeah, you pretty much. That's exactly what I do. I actually have a hard knocker here. I don't know if you can even hear it, and then I have a silent. I have 2 of them. So if you can see, one has.
That's my favorite color right there.
Oh yeah, the chartreuse with black back.
Yep.
Yeah, in like a little bit of stained water, or even early in the morning on clear water days, or a foggy day. The chartreuse is really, really good. But sometimes I'll use a silent one. I don't use silent ones a lot, but you're right. If there's a lot of people around, or they're just barely biting the bait, or not, you just want to try something different, I definitely recommend picking up a silent crankbait. I mean, look, these hooks are still going to hit against this bait. It's still going to make a lot of noise coming through there, but it will just be different than. I mean, how many people have KVD 1.5 that have that same sound? Like after KVD started crushing on everywhere, or you can switch over to a like the 1.0, the Strike King 1.0, just smaller. I actually like to throw this on a spinning rod. You can throw it on a bait caster, but if it's windy out, I'll get a spinning rod and I'll get 10-pound braid and maybe like 8-pound leader. Do like a 6 or 8 foot leader. But on a spinning rod, you can cast it a long way, and just sometimes get that bite that you won't get, on a bigger crankbait.
So when it comes to, choosing the different sizes of square bills, when do you go really big and when do you go really small?
Yeah. Well, like I just said, probably a good example would be if it's a calm, slick day and the water's clear, it's sometimes going to be tough to catch them on a crankbait just because they get a really good look at it. But usually in the morning, you can always catch, especially like on the smallmouth lakes, like Center Hill Lake, Tim's Ford. Those smallmouth are kind of roaming early in the morning, even if the water's clear and there's no wind. I like to throw a smaller crankbait or something more natural color. And then if I'm in a big fish lake and there's a little stain in the water, I might pick up the KVD 2.5, which is a lot bigger. I think it goes down a little bit deeper too, like maybe 5 or 6 feet. But I mean, it just kind of depends on the conditions. Like super clear, calm day, you can downsize. If it's muddy, if you have some wind, just the regular, KVD 1.5 square bill is perfect. It just depends.
Gotcha. I know another one of the big questions that I get asked a lot is for retrieve, and I know you talked about how you can work it too fast. And I think when I first started, that was definitely something I was totally guilty of. And
yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about how you get the feel for that, and also what other things you add into your retrieve. Whether like I know I've heard like when you're cranking and you hit something, obviously you said about stopping, That's also a good time, not only to avoid getting snagged, but that's also, can draw strikes because that kind of hits that instinct for bass to hit something when it does something like that, or when you rip it out of grass, or that kind of thing.
Sure. Most of the time, my speed is dictated by when I can feel the bottom. Because not every bait has to hit the bottom to catch fish. Obviously, if you're throwing rattle traps, then they're not going to be digging on the bottom all the time. But I like to say if I'm throwing 4 feet, I'm throwing a square bill. I cast it out, give it 3 or 4 fast cranks to get it down, and usually I'm just reeling slow, and as long as I can feel the bottom. And Sean, I don't know if you experienced this, but you'll be reeling a crankbait and say it comes off the bottom a little bit, and all of a sudden you don't feel the wobble anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is, that's a fish tracking it. And sometimes, like you'll do it so much that you actually feel that bait stop. You're like, oh man, I got a piece of grass on it, and all of a sudden your rod bows up, and you're like, what's going on? You're like that was a fish tracking it. Yeah, when he gets behind it, the bait stops vibrating as much. Something changes, and you actually can learn that. But what I like to do, like if I'm reeling to like a brush pile, and it's like really thick, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get hung up. I'll stop, and then I'll let it float up a little bit, and then I won't reel it. I'll work it like a worm. I'll kind of pull my rod, so it slowly kind of like bounces through. You know what I mean? So don't if you hit like a brush pile, you stop and let it float. Like don't just keep cranking real fast. Just kind of pull your rod. Don't reel it. Just pull your rod, and the bait will kind of work. You're gonna get hung up sometimes, but it'll work its way through eventually. And then once you feel loose, you can start reeling again. A lot of times, as soon as it comes through, that's a lot of times when you'll get that bite, and you can just set it. So
I think it was Matt Gibson I was talking to about cold water cranking, and that was one of his tips for cold water cranking is to not crank as much with the reel, but actually just drag, and it's a different kind of wobble and a different kind of action that you get when you do that too. So that was one of the things he recommended for cold water cranking, especially. But it makes sense. A lot of people don't, when they look at a lot of noobs, when they look at a treble hook bait like a square bill, they're like, well, I'm not going to throw that near any kind of brush, but it really is kind of a 4-wheel drive kind of lure, man. If you're not throwing it in that kind of stuff, you're missing a lot of fish because it's kind of made for that.
Yeah, and it's probably the reason I love it so much is because you can let's just say you have a log just sticking out of the water, right? There's not a lot of limbs on it. You go up to it, you make 2 casts on the right, and then what you do is you cast to the right and put your rod tip to the left, right? So basically here I have a drumstick. I'm a drummer too. So
cool.
So like if you cast, it's kind of hard to explain by the camera here, but basically I cast to the far side and I want it to come and hit this and deflect and turn this way, right? So you want it to come, and when it deflects like that thing will pop out really quick. And a lot of times that fish is sitting there, that deflection they just can't stand it. Even if you do it, you cast to the right side a couple of times and then cast to the left side. I mean, sometimes I've cast like 8 or 10 times into one laydown because one's there. Like it just looks too good. One's there, so you cast at every angle, and maybe your 3rd or 4th cast they'll just come out and just destroy it. A lot of people miss that fish. They've already moved on. They're down there. But if you take your time, I don't do it every time, but if it looks good, I'll hit it at different angles and. Because that reaction bite, those fish don't want to eat, but sometimes they just can't resist it. They just have to eat it, and you just got to get it in that right spot where they just react on it.
Absolutely. Yes. And then do you add in other pops or vary your retrieve other than that, or?
I will do this if I'm like fishing an area, like let's just say I'm kind of on a steeper bank and I throw a DT6 up. And it's only hitting bottom for the first half or something like that. I will definitely I'll just stop it real quick. Like if I'm hitting bottom, and all of a sudden it releases off the bottom, and I know I'm just in open water, I'll just stop, quick stop, and then just reel it in. And a lot of times when the fish is smaller, they'll smack it. So, but honest, most of the time. it's a steady retrieve, and I'm trying to hit the bottom and, hit those rocks and, kind of stay in contact with the bottom. That's what I'm normally trying to do probably 90% of the time.
So your primary goal of your retrieve is just to maintain that just very slight bottom contact.
I try to, yeah, I try to, if it's, and sometimes you're fishing, a lay down, that's deeper, like 5 or 6 feet, and you just want to get it down and make sure it's down. When it gets there, it's going to hit, and deflect off of it and then come back up. So, but most of the time, yeah, I'm trying to be on the bottom, and you'll get in lakes where they get like that slime on the bottom, or something like that. And then I'll usually switch to a spinnerbait or a chatterbait or a swim bait, because you don't want to fight that all day, because it will be a long day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
Like, that was a perfect cast, and then your bait gets all messed up with that.
That was one of the most disappointing things about one of my local lakes. It has one side of the lake is almost entirely right along a highway, so it's just a riprap bank that goes the whole one side of the lake. And it was amazing for the first couple of years that I fished it, but then they got this weird algae thing and now that riprap bank is also covered in this green algae snot stuff.
I know. It's so, believe me, I've had the best looking banks in the world. You get over there, it's so disappointing. You're just like, God, man. But, I mean, you throw a swim bait or a chatterbait, they'll eat it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still fishable. It's just, I couldn't crank it anymore as much. So,
yeah, you want to bounce it off those rocks and feel them eat it.
Exactly. Absolutely. 100%. So,
yeah.
Cool, man. Anything else you had on your list of things to cover? I'm trying to think. I know you gave us some like topo maps and stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I can bring those up if you want.
Yeah. Yeah. So this map here, this is Lake Chickamauga, and this is kind of mid lake. This is where a lot of my fishing was done for the Bassmaster Championship there. And you can see on the bottom, on the south end, on the east and west, there's 2 really, really good spawning pockets.
Right here?
Let's see. I can't see your mouse.
Maybe it doesn't show up on here.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah. That's all right. That's all right. I won't see it. But it was tricky because this lake was really low, right? And they dropped the water, almost no current. So these pockets look great. But if you go in these pockets, in the very back of these pockets, there was pretty much nothing there. There was no bait, no bluegill. I mean, it was just, and all the stumps were out of the water. Like I was telling you earlier, Susie, all the stumps were out of the water. It was rough, but the fish want to be there, right? It's that time of year. The water's starting to warm up. We had a big cold front for that event, but the water's starting to warm up. So if you look, like the main lake where it touches in between those 2 pockets right there, I was throwing a DT6 and a DT10 by those docks right there. And basically, something we didn't talk about earlier is I was paralleling any chance I could get. Now, on day 1, there was some current. So from when I look at this picture, the current's coming from right to left, right?
Okay.
So that's toward the dam to the right. That's where they're releasing water. So when I'm fishing, I'm facing to the right. I'm facing in the current, casting in the current, pulling it down, just like you would in a small creek or river. But this one's just giant, right? It's the same deal. But those fish want to go to those 2 spawning pockets. That's where they want to be, and they're coming from the main lake from the winter spots, and they're gonna stop on those docks right there in that that 8-10 foot of water. And there you go. Yeah, right there. I don't know if you can zoom in or not, but yeah, I can see your pointer now.
Okay, right here. Yeah.
Right. See all those docks right there? You can see that 8, 10, 6, all that right there. That's where I was catching all of my fish right there. And there was current there on day 1, right? So I had a limit, probably in the first hour and a half, throwing a DT6 and a DT10 right there.
Okay.
So that was key. And if you go to the left a little bit,
other
yeah,
left?
if you go, no, he's going the right way. He's going the right. You're going the right way.
Oh, with the next slide or the next shot, or
you're good right there. Keep it right there. That's perfect. Okay. Right in the middle of the screen, that bank where your cursor is. You see where it gets a little deeper by the bank right there? See those tight lines right there from Navionics?
Oh, yep.
That's where that wind was blowing and created that mud line. And that right there is where I caught 3 or 4. I caught two really big fish late in the day was right there. There's nothing really on that bank, but you see that little bit of depth change right there. Because those fish are coming from the main river, and they want to get to the back of there and spawn. So they got to stop somewhere, right? And this is where they were.
Okay. Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Very nice.
So cool. Let's see. Trying to think. Anything else you can think of off the top of your head?
I would say, like, if I brought a guy who's never crankbait before or doesn't fish a lot, the first thing I'm going to notice is first thing I'm going to tell them is to parallel the bank. Most guys are going to go up. Most guys are going to go up, cast at the bank, and if they're shallow, you want your bait to stay shallow, right? So you kind of get your kayak, even get it, right next to the bank. I mean, you can have the trees right there, right? And you want to keep your bait, if these fish are in 2 to 5 foot of water, you want to keep your bait in 2 to 5 foot of water. If you're sitting way out there, you're in the strike zone for 5 feet, 10 feet, and then it's gone, right?
Right.
But if the fish are shallow, that's where they want to be, especially this time of year, even pre-spawn, during the spawn, and post-spawn. There's still going to be a lot of fish shallow. Put your kayak against the bank and fish parallel, and you keep that bait in that depth zone the whole cast. I mean, and then cover water, like, make a 40, 50 foot cast, reel it in, and just slowly move forward and just keep covering water. And parallel on the bank is probably the number one thing that guys need to learn quick.
I find when I do that, it helps me maintain bottom contact too. Susquehanna is easy because everything is that depth, but on lakes and stuff, like you're right. If you are casting perpendicular to the bank, you're going to be in that 2 to 5 foot zone right at the bank for a little bit, but then 90% of your cast is kind of wasted at that point. So if you make that simple adjustment and cast with the bank, parallel to the bank, you're going to be in the strike zone like 90% of your cast instead of 10% of your cast the other way. So.
Especially when you're fishing, riprap, when you're fishing rock, I'll obviously look for transitions. You're like, what is a transition? A transition where you go from giant boulders to small boulders real quick. That spot is just a high percentage spot, and also, fishing any areas that have wind, that's probably one of the number one things is fishing, clear lakes, actually really any lake, is fish that wind blown bank. I know we mentioned it earlier, but I'm telling you, guys, if you go watch like Major League Fishing, you go watch Bassmaster, the guys who are not live scoping, not counting those guys, the guys that are fishing, a lot of times you'll see the wind behind their back, and they're fishing against the bank where the wind's being blown. And that is something that most guys who are new they're not going to notice it. They're just going to see a guy fishing the bank. But look at that. Most of the time when they're fishing moving baits, that wind is blowing. Those fish are just going to be more active. The bait fish are going to be around, and they're more willing to bite your bait.
And I was going to mention too, when you mentioned about fishing the transition areas, when I first started fishing, didn't have electronics. I kind of was struggling to find those kind of areas, but a lot of times you can see it on the bank. If it transitions on the bank, odds are that transition follows underwater, and so definitely keep an eye out on the bank for when it changes from those big chunk rock to smaller or even pea gravel, or even from rock to a clay bank. Even that transition can be sometimes good.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes those bare clay banks, they don't look like anything, but have some wind on them or some current, can be really good. A lot of times they're overlooked because like, oh man, there's no log, there's no rocks. But man, you never know. So.
That was one thing that just fishing on the river, creeks to river transition. And anytime you have a color change in the water, like, so the creek is a little bit clearer than the main river or vice versa, fish will sit on that current, the color change and just ambush, and so
absolutely.
And I think that with the clay banks also comes a lot into play,
Yeah, I experienced that exact situation. I was on Lake Seminole, and I was fishing on the Chattahoochee side. You got the Chattahoochee and the Flint, right? Yeah, the Flint. And I was on the Chattahoochee side, and there's a creek, crystal clear, spring-fed creek that was coming into the muddy Chattahoochee. But that creek was super shallow. Like there wasn't really much in there. But right where that clear water, warmer water was dumping in there, the fish were stacked up right there. So I actually sat in one spot and caught every fish I caught in that tournament for 2 days in one spot where that clear water was dumping in to the Chattahoochee. So yeah, that scenario is, if you can find it and you're the only one to find it, like don't tell anybody. You're like, yeah, just yeah, I caught a few because they're not, you know, like, I don't know, those little spots those are fun when you can find them, and you're the only one that finds them. You know,
absolutely, yep,
yeah.
I did think of one other question. Do you ever recommend like switching out hooks from any brands, like right out of the package? Because I mean, I know when it comes to jerk baits, I know that there are some that I'm like, oh yeah, no, I got to change these out because they aren't sometimes the best, you know, not to bash on brands or anything like that. But I mean, do you have ones that like, yeah, right out of the package, it's ready to go, or other ones you're just like, yeah, I'd probably recommend, you know, maybe switching those out?
Not like most of the time, I just use them out of the package. But if I'm in a big tournament, I'll switch to the triple grips, the Mustad triple grips on all my crankbaits. That's what I recommend. But honestly, the Rapala ones, I think they come with the VMCs, and I don't have any problems. If they are swiping at the bait, I will upsize one hook, one size. But you got to be careful on the square bills, because if you upsize your hook, it'll get caught on the bill.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I hate that.
Like oh, it's the worst. Or just maybe upsize just the back hook. You can do that, or you can upsize and get one that have a smaller, you know, it's not as long, you know. But I don't play with the hooks a whole lot. But if I'm fishing a tournament, I'm switching everything in triple grips. I have a lot of confidence in those, but I'm not spending a ton of money, you know, changing every time I get them, you know. Now, if all I did is fish big, if I fished Hobie and Bassmaster and KBF, that's all I did, and I'm doing that for a living, yes, every single one of my crankbaits would have triple grips on it. So, just because, I mean, if you can help anything, you know, the hooks, the line, the weight,
put the odds in your
rod,
favor, right?
Reel. Right.
I mean, these baits get a lot of bites. That's one thing about it. And I'm a person that fishes for bites. I don't necessarily always fish for big fish, and sometimes I need to do that, but I like to get a lot of bites, and just at the end of the day, hopefully I run into a big one or two in a tournament. You gotta just try to just help your odds as much as you can, you know?
Right. And it definitely got to give you, you know, more confidence as well, you know, because I mean, the more a bait or a lure gives you more confidence, you know, it's gonna have you keep going to it, and then you're gonna learn more from it too. It's like you were saying, like as the fish homes in on it, it stops wobbling as much. As just like, wow, I never even would have thought of that or noticed that till you said something. I was like, I'm gonna have to pay attention now to see if I could ever notice that.
Yeah, I bet she doesn't believe me, Sean.
No, it's got to be from the first time we had you on, that because I had remembered that, and as I got into cranking more, I've definitely experienced in that, you know, and it's kind of cool because then you know that you're just waiting for it to get hammered. You're like, oh,
it's really cool. So Susie, what I recommend you do is just go find a good stock pond somewhere. I'm sure you know one, or know somebody that has one, or I'm sure you got them all around you. Bring square bills with you, and just throw it all day, and you'll start to see what we're talking about. You're like, oh, that's what he was talking about. He wasn't messing with me that day.
It's interesting, you know, because it's just like, you know, no matter like what topic we have or what guest we have on here, there's always something new to learn. And like these little things is just what like fascinates me a lot of times, because I'm just like, I'm going to have to try that out so I can try to experience that.
Yeah. Well, what's cool, like if you go fish a pond and the wind's blowing, go fish the calm side, assuming they're kind of the same, you know.
Right.
And then go fish the windy side. And I'll give you $20 if you don't catch more on the windy side. Okay?
You talked about you know when you foul hook or when the hook gets up on the bill, and it's always for me when I make that perfect cast and I'm like, oh, I crushed that cast, and then
just think about it. Just think about it, is now you're throwing top water. So just
right, there you
think of it like that.
It's a wake bait now.
It goes like that across the top.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. Usually pretty fast because I'm angry at that point. You know.
Me too. And sometimes it'll correct itself, but not in a tournament. You know.
Yeah.
It's just,
Then it's gonna ride the top the whole way back.
Most time, like what the issue that I have is like I'll throw a lot of spros and the hooks will constantly hook each other on those.
Really?
I just the little Johns. It just seems like I always just get them to hook each other.
Oh, that would drive me. I mean, you can always downsize the front hook and see if that helps.
Yeah.
That would drive me crazy. I don't throw. I know Spro makes great crankbaits. I don't throw a lot of them. I throw mostly Strike King and Rappo. That's pretty much what I stick with. I have been throwing the Berkeley, the Pitbull. The reason I like this Pitbull so much is that this one color I just really love, because I fish the Etowah River and it's really clear a lot of times. I love throwing those clear crankbaits in that clear water. But
yeah, with the Spro. Actually, that was going to be another quick question I was going to ask you too. Do you ever like switch between using like the flat-sided crankbaits versus like your regular shaped ones? Because that's the reason why I fish the Spros, is because most of them are the flat-sided ones.
Right. Yeah, and those are great. The DT6 is kind of considered, I'd say, a flat side, but I mean it does have that more tight wobble to it. But I'll just run through. So this is kind of how I keep my crankbait organized. That's kind of another good thing too. This is my square. This is all square bills. So this is basically, and I have a bunch on my desk here too. This is basically 5-6 foot or shallower, right? So that's box number 1. And box number 2 is, I have more, but it's like DT6s and DT10s. And so basically that's 0 to 10 feet, right? DT10s go about 10 feet. And then here I have like my Strike King 5XDs, 6XDs, and these I have to be in these small containers because I also fish the Major League Fish, the BFLs as a co-angler. So I have my pack. I can take them out of my black pack right into my backpack. So I would normally use bigger boxes and have more, but this is how I do it. So,
nice.
So that's kind of how I do, like 0 to 4 feet. 6 to 10 feet, and then basically 10 feet down, to 20, 25 feet that was in this box. So I don't do a lot of that 20 foot plus. I do a lot of 20 foot and shallower cranking. It's tough in a kayak to do that 20 foot plus.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just, it's a lot of guys do it. I don't love doing it. I mean, I feel like I can do okay, stay in 20 foot or shallower. Probably 18 foot or shallower is where I stick to.
Nice.
Cool. And like to Susie's question, is there ever a time where you would opt for a more flat-sided crankbait versus is there? I know the wobble is a lot of times different. Is there when would be a good time to go for a tighter wobble versus a kind of like the bigger, really rocking one?
Yeah, the textbook answer is that tighter wobble is better in colder weather. I'm throwing, like if it's really cold, I might be throwing like a shad wrap on a spinning rod. If it's really cold and it's brutal, but I know they'll still eat a crankbait, I might downsize to a shad wrap. A DT6 for me is year round. I don't care how cold the water is. I feel in my head, I can catch a fish on a DT6 from but I'm also down here in the south, so the water. I'm not gonna see water in the 30s.
Right.
Unless something crazy happens. I'll see water in the upper 40s. So I'm fishing it year round.
Let me come to Dale Hollow and you'll probably see water in the 30s. It's just how it's
That's like my brother-in-law. Anytime my brother-in-law Tyler comes to the tournament or anything, it's raining and windy every time. Like, stay home, man. Stay home. So I usually stick with the DT stuff and like shad wraps when it's super cold out. But if it's warm month, if it's muddy water, I'm throwing a big square bill that has a lot of wobble. Like the Strike King 5XDs have a lot of wobble. I throw those a lot too.
Cool. And I know you mentioned the hybrid hunter for around grass. Is there any other kind of really specific ones that you get to for other kinds of structure or anything like that?
Not really. I mean, the hybrid hunter just kind of started. I started throwing that this year. It's really cool though. I think I'm going to get some more of them. It does come through hydrilla. I mean, obviously, if it's thick, it's not going to. But
I was just going to say, because that's why I bought it. I bought it for the celery grass on the Susquehanna, and it doesn't come through that. But
there's some stuff you nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So, but like sparse hydrilla, it came through eelgrass pretty nice, which was pretty good. I was fishing a lot of that in Florida. So, but really, I mean the shad, start from the Shad Rap, KVD 2.5, the 1.0, like I mentioned earlier, if the water's clear, if it's a really calm day or the fish are finicky, you can downsize. You can go to the Strike King KVD 2.5, which is a bigger square bill for, say muddy water or bigger fish, like if you're on Chickamauga or Lake Fork, or you're going to get some big bites. And then I usually jump to deeper. I go to DT6, Rapala, DT10. And then after the 10, I might go to like a DT14, or I'll go and start using the Strike King 5XD. I really love the 5XD.
Yeah.
That's a really good deep diver crankbait. That's mostly what I use. I use the Berkeley stuff a little bit.
Cool. And for the 5XDs and stuff, you're still using mono on that too? Mono for everything?
I am. I have a 7. So when I'm throwing those 5XDs, I'm using a 7'10" rod.
Okay.
So it's a 7'10". It's a heavy moderate. So it's got that nice soft moderate tip. And when I cast it, it's so long that I can cast it a mile. That's the main thing is you got to get a long cast, get that bait down. Fluoro, I mean, I could use fluoro, but I just stick with mono.
Yep.
Something I've done for years, and some guys might disagree with me, but
hey, if it works and it's cheaper, so, makes perfect sense to me.
If it ain't broke,
that's right. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, Craig. Well, I wanted to give you a chance to shout out where folks can find you and follow along with your content, and any other sponsors or anything you wanted to shout out.
I mean, my number one sponsor is New Canoe. Also Westbrook Supply, and I work with St. Croix Rods and, Dakota Lithium, Benny Branches Paddles, Yak Attack. They got that new card out. Have you seen that new Yak Attack card?
Oh, yeah.
I have.
I just saw it in person down at Dale Hollow, and I was pretty jealous.
I've had it for 2 weeks, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't share anything with it, so it's pretty cool. And, Dakota Lithium Batteries, they help me out, too, take care of me so I can run that motor guide around. But if you want to come see what I like to do, which is fish, I can do fish a lot of current. I like to throw crankbaits. I fish some tournaments when I can. I do some BFLs. I fish as a co-angler. So if you like that kind of thing, I just search on YouTube, Dive Fishing, DYE Fishing, and Instagram is also Dive Fishing, and then on Facebook, Craig Dive Kayak Fishing, and you'll see all my stuff on there. And if you like fishing, that's what you'll see, because I post often. So, I try to get out. Also, I fish with my sons. I have a 6-year-old and 9-year-old. So I bring them out in the New Canoe Unlimited. We fish tandem a lot. Luckily, where I moved, I have a 5-acre pond about 200 yards that way.
Awesome.
That's full of fish. So it's really cool that I can just walk down there and bring them and fish a lot. So, that's about it.
Awesome.
Very, very cool. Well, I will make sure I include notes or links to your social media down in the show notes. So if anybody who's interested in following along there, and we'll make sure we, put some links to some of your sponsors there as well, so people can check that out. And
Thanks. Appreciate
that. Thanks again for coming back on and, giving us a lot of juice here on crankbaits. So
I just love it. It's easy to talk about something you love.
Absolutely. So cool, man. Well, thanks again, and we'll definitely have to have you on again. And anything else, Susie?
I got nothing.
All right.
I got something. Something.
Yeah.
Susie, what is that thing behind your chair back there? The heck is that thing?
Oh, my dragon statue?
Yeah. The heck is that? Go get that. I got to see that. Sean's been driving me crazy. I've been looking at
Wow.
it for the last. Look at that thing.
That's way cooler
you
even
do?
in person there up close. Oh, it has like a
What is
crystal
that?
ball and everything.
What is that for?
It's just a statue decoration. I've had this thing since I was in high school. It's
How about
cool.
that?
You know, a big Chinese dragon statue thing.
Good. Good. Now I know. I had to ask, Sean. Sorry. You got to
Hey, no.
derail.
All good, man. All good. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for tuning in tonight. Make sure, like I said, check out all the links in the show notes. I'll throw in a bunch of the baits that we talked about as well. So we'll try and get you guys everything you need to get started cranking. So get out there, give it a try. You hook one fish and you're going to fall in love with it. So give it a try. And again, thanks for tuning in. This has been another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin podcast, where we bring you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. You guys have a good night.